Thank you, members, for allowing us some time there, and folks out in the audience, just kind of get things set up. This is our first meeting of the second year of this General Assembly. It's so good to be back and good to see everybody. I say that now, and hopefully I'll continue to say that weeks to come. Before we get started, I did want to just to take a personal privilege here. I want us to all remember Representative Mike Carter. You know, it's the first time this committee's met since we lost Mike. And Mike was such a big part of the Judiciary Committee in so many ways. He was a mentor to me and many other members here. He had this amazing ability to do a lot of things, but one of the most important things that I'll try to learn from Mike was how to explain things in ways that people could understand them. And he just had an amazing ability to do that. He was such a kind soul. We all know that who worked with Mike, but I did just like to take a moment of silence for Representative Mike Carter. Thank you. And with that said, Madam Clerk, if we can go ahead and take the roll, and we'll get started.
Representatives Bricken, Clemens, Curcio,
Here.
Eldridge, Garrett, Gillespie, Griffey, Harris, Littleton, Ogles, Parkinson, Ramsey, Russell, Smith, Stewart, Vice Chairman Jernigan, Chairman Farmer.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. And members, Representative Smith let me know she's in a meeting with the governor, and that she would be here momentarily. So just want to let everybody know that. And she means no disrespect to this committee. So anyways, and I do want to recognize, we have an intern this year. Mac, where are you? Mac is right back there. Matt Podolsny, there we go. So Mac's doing a good job. And then everyone else in here, I believe, is veteran to the committee. So with that said, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to go ahead and take care of the calendar. We have one item on today's calendar. That's House Bill 1707 by Leader Lamberth. Sir, you've got a motion and a second, and you're properly recognized on House Bill 1707.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is the codification bill each year that is carried to codify the 2,200 pages of work that this committee and so many others were dedicated to last year and in the extraordinary sessions. It is available electronically on the G Drive for you to review at your leisure if you have not already. So that's the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, members, this is something we pass every year. It's the Tennessee Rules of Civil Procedure. Do you have any questions on that? Chairman Curcio, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish to call previous question.
Very good. Any objection? Seeing none, looks like we're ready to vote to send House Bill 1707 to calendar and rules. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Ayes have it. Bill moves on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and I hope you're half as kind to me next time as you were this time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And next up today, members, as we did last week in criminal justice, we have the pleasure of having our nominee Sarah Campbell that the governor has nominated for the vacancy on the Tennessee Supreme Court today. So what I'd like to do is just kind of let everybody know how this works. The role of this committee is to hold a hearing on the nominee and provide a recommendation either for confirmation of the nominee or rejection of the nominee to the full House floor. In a moment, I'll introduce the governor's chief counsel, who will introduce the nominee to the committee. After the nominee makes her opening statement, I will open the floor, the committee, for questions from the members. So with that said, I'd like to go ahead and without objection go out of session. And I'm going to introduce the governor's chief counsel, Jonathan Skrmetti. Sir, if you would just go ahead, and I know I just introduced you, but introduce yourself to the committee, and I'm just going to allow you an opportunity to introduce the governor's nominee to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jonathan Skrmetti, Chief Counsel for Governor Lee. It is my privilege to be here today to introduce you to Sarah Campbell, the governor's nominee for the Tennessee Supreme Court. Sarah is a distinguished native Tennessean. She attended the University of Tennessee, where she was a torchbearer among many other honors. She attended Duke Law School, where she distinguished herself again. And she clerked for two of the finest jurists in the United States of America, Judge William Pryor on the 11th Circuit and Justice Samuel Alito on the United States Supreme Court. She was a litigator at one of the best law firms in the country. And then we had the very good fortune of bringing Sarah back to Tennessee to work at the Tennessee Attorney General's office, where she worked in the Solicitor General's office and represented the state in some of its most important appellate litigation over the past nearly 7 years. It is a privilege to introduce you to Sarah. Her accomplishments match her abilities, And I just want to sound a note of caution before we begin. Because she's a judicial nominee, and because there are many different cases that could potentially come before the Tennessee Supreme Court, there may be questions that she can't answer due to the Tennessee Code of Judicial Conduct. So please be aware if there's something she can't answer, she's not trying to dodge the question, she's just trying to do her job. And with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Sarah Campbell.
Very good. Ms. Campbell, if you would, just, you can sit or stand however you'd like there at the podium. You can be there, and there should be a red light that's on there. Is it on?
It is.
Okay, very good. And congratulations for being here. You've made it this far.
Thank you.
No, you're in good shape. Just a couple more, just a little bit longer. You're going to get there, right? So, but just wanted to thank you for being here. We're proud of you. And if you would, I'm just going to give you some time just to introduce yourselves to the committee and talk about a little bit, kind of introductory sort of thing. And then what we'll do next is we can move on and allow the committee. We can open the committee up for questions. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Farmer, and thank you, Vice Chairman Jernigan, and thank you, committee members, for your time today. It's really an honor to be here. I know how valuable your time is, especially during this busy season, and so it really is an honor to be here, and I look forward to answering your questions. I do want to begin by thanking Jonathan for the kind introduction and thanking Governor Lee for placing his confidence in me and appointing me to serve on the Tennessee Supreme Court. My husband of 16 years, Scott Campbell, is here with me today, so I would like to take a moment to introduce him. He is my biggest supporter and encourager and a truly exceptional husband and father. And on top of that, he is an accomplished high school teacher, high school principal, and he now leads a nonprofit that helps first-generation college students succeed when they go off to college. We have 3 sons who are 8, 5, and 3. They are in school today and unfortunately could not be here, but I know they'll be excited to watch the replay at home tonight. I've been fortunate to spend the bulk of my legal profession in public service. First as a law clerk for 2 highly respected and highly principled federal judges, and more recently as an attorney for the state defending laws passed by this General Assembly. As you know, public service is incredibly meaningful and rewarding. Serving as a justice on the Tennessee Supreme Court is the opportunity of a lifetime. I'm eager to take on that new role, and I thank you for your time today and look forward to answering your questions.
Very good, and thank you for that. And members, if you don't mind, I'll start us out. I just wanted to ask a little bit about your judicial philosophy and general approach to decision making. So if you can talk about how that may play into this role as a member of our Tennessee State Supreme Court.
Sure. I'm a textualist and originalist, and that's how I will approach legal questions that come before the court. I will decide legal questions based on the text of the law that is at issue, or the text of the constitutional provision that's at issue. And that means that I will look at the plain meaning of those words. I'll consider statutory context. I will use dictionaries and other tools to help determine what the plain meaning of the language is, and that will guide my decision, free of any influence of my own personal views on whether the law is a good one or a bad one.
Very good. Members? Chairman Curcio, you're recognized. Griffey, I have you next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. I know this committee is honored to get to play our part in this role, and it's always an honor to get to meet with the different judicial candidates, and I just want to thank you and thank your husband and your family for allowing you to serve in this capacity, because I know it's going to take a lot of hours and a lot of time away from home. So thank you for being willing to serve, and I think that's so important, especially this day and age. You talked a little bit about your judicial philosophy, and so I actually had a question about textualism, but you kind of covered that. So what I'll ask is this: you've obtained significant experience while clerking for Judge Pryor on the 11th Circuit and for Justice Alito, of course, we talked about. And I'm sure this has given you a real close-up look at what it takes to be, a good judge. So in your opinion, how will you know you have succeeded as a judge? What's a good Supreme Court justice look like?
I think the surest sign that I have succeeded in fulfilling my role is that at times I will reach decisions in cases that are contrary to kind of my personal views about what would be a good outcome or a bad outcome, based on whatever those personal views might be. I think that when a judge applies really neutral principles and objective principles to decide a case, that should happen, at least sometimes, that the judge has to reach an outcome that they personally might be uncomfortable with.
Very good, Chairman Garcia.
Thank you for that response. I mean, I think that's I would agree, and I think if your personal feelings are influencing your ruling, then you're not following the law and you're not following the Constitution 100% of the time. You're following your own law and your own Constitution, but not that of the state of Tennessee. So that's great to hear, and I know this committee's very impressed by that answer. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good. And I just want to chime in here. With that said, I wanted to ask you, what role does legislative history or intent play in interpreting statutes or constitutional provisions? How do you feel about how would that?
The only thing that a majority of the General Assembly votes to approve, is the text of the statute. So that would guide my ruling in a case. The plain meaning of the text of the statute. I find legislative history, things like statements by individual legislators, to be really not helpful in determining what the intent of the legislature might have been, because a single comment, from a legislator is not something that's approved by the majority of the General Assembly. So I would focus on the text of the statute, and would really not consider legislative history to be a reliable indicator of legislative intent.
Okay, and with that said, let's talk about originalism. Can you explain what originalism means to you and how it will affect you and your job?
Originalism is a method of constitutional interpretation, and under that method, the Constitution should be interpreted according to how the public would have understood the words of the Constitution at the time it was adopted. So we're guided by what the words meant at the time of ratification, and not what those words might mean today, all these years later.
Very good. And I apologize, members. Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, Judge Campbell. I'm envious that you clerked for Justice Alito, a great textualist himself, and thrilled to hear that you are a textualist concerning interpreting constitutional law. And let me ask you this, if I may, first. I think we really got two questions. First off, why is it important, and could you please explain why you are a textualist as it relates to the rights that the citizens give to the government via a constitution, and what that means and how they're limited in our system of government, and the danger if we take the other approach of sort of its living document? If you could, please.
Sure. Our nation is one of laws and not of men, and the only way that we can ensure that we remain a nation of laws is if the laws themselves, the written word of those laws, is what governs. And when judges apply the law based on their own predispositions or their own views about what that law is, and take license to interpret it in a way that's not consistent with the text that was actually voted on, then that erodes the rule of law, and it erodes our separation of powers.
Representative Griffey.
And in fact, the Constitution actually has an amendment process for it. So if the citizens want to disagree with the law of the land or whatever, feel like there should be amendments to it, we have that process, and we actually deprive ourselves of everyone in the nation of that process that we originally set up. So my next question relates to challenging prior Supreme Court decisions. If there's a decision out there, and there are many that people may disagree with, one might be Plyer versus Doe or whatever, and I don't want to put you in a spot if you don't feel like you can comment, but is it inappropriate for a state legislature to pass legislation that they think the states have a right to assert, but the Supreme Court has previously held as unconstitutional? Maybe it was a 5-4 decision. Is it inappropriate for the state to do that and institute a challenge to a prior Supreme Court decision?
I think that's an issue that could arise in litigation at some point in the future, so I can't answer that at this time.
I understand. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, and good luck to you, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Representative Griffey. Representative Garrett, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Sarah, thank you for going through this process, for your willingness to be a justice in the Tennessee Supreme Court. What a high honor that is, and I'm excited to see what you're going to do. But first and foremost, Scott, thank you for one of the first things she said was your utmost support, and you are her biggest fan, and I appreciate that. Public service is certainly an honorable profession, but it's also can be a very difficult profession on the families of not just the person that's serving, but also the spouses, the kids, and et cetera. So thank you for your commitment to her and her role she's about to agree to in our state to be one of 5 of our Tennessee Supreme Court justices. So I really appreciate that. One thing, I got a couple of questions for you. I am now in my 16th year of practicing law. My practice is around the civil world. And I remember the day that I was sworn in front of the Supreme Court. My mentor said, well, now you could be a Supreme Court justice, right? I mean, under our laws, technically a new lawyer can be someone that's on a high court or even a judge fairly quick there. But that's not exactly true, right? I mean, you need some experiences in order to, I believe, have the judicial temperament, the understanding of our statutes, to be able to interpret those and then make a ruling based upon the facts that are in front of you before you have that experience. So experience matters as a lawyer, right? Before they become, I think, a judge. So you have certainly an extraordinary amount of experience in a short period of time that is extraordinary, both in the public sector and the private sector. So I'm kind of curious, what would be the first thing that would come to your mind that would help you in your either experience in your public life when you're in the public sector or in the private sector? What's that one thing that says or that prepares you to be a judge?
I think the most relevant experience for becoming a judge is my time in the Attorney General's office. For the past 6.5 years, I've litigated some of the state's most difficult cases, really complicated questions of law that required a lot of focus, a lot of attention, a lot of detailed research. Those are the same kinds of questions that come before the Tennessee Supreme Court. So I think that experience prepares me. My experience clerking does as well. I mean, clerking is different from being the judge, and I appreciate that distinction. But particularly my time clerking on the U.S. Supreme Court, those two were incredibly complex issues and difficult issues. They wouldn't have been at the U.S. Supreme Court were they not. Those are questions that had divided the lower courts, on which very highly qualified, intelligent federal judges had disagreed. And that experience, I think, prepares me well to take on this new role as well.
Good deal. Thank you for that. My last sort of question or maybe comment, maybe you can enlighten us a little bit. We talked when we met earlier, I believe yesterday, about your experience with the Supreme Court, and I only know a few people that have been able to be clerk with our U.S. Supreme Court, and it's just an interesting institution on how they come and rule on a particular issue that's before them. And so with your career, you've obviously interacted with many talented lawyers, jurists, et cetera. And I was wondering if you could share from whomever comes to your mind that you have crossed paths with, what has been the best advice that they had given you that has helped you prepare for this moment to almost be the next justice of the Tennessee Supreme Court? What's that one person or one thing that you can say that someone gave you, so anybody listening out there might be able to hear your response and maybe go the same path that you have?
Yeah, the first job I had after law school was clerking for Judge Bill Pryor on the 11th Circuit. He is a remarkable judge and an even more remarkable mentor. My time that I spent, that 1 year that I spent clerking in his chambers, was really a formative experience for me. I learned so much from him. I recall the first case that I worked on when I was in his chambers, and I got the parties' briefs, and I prepared a bench memorandum providing a recommendation on how the case would come out, and it was my first assignment. I was nervous as all get out, trying to do the best job that I could, and he read the bench memorandum and came back in and told me that he didn't think the court had jurisdiction to hear the case, an issue that the parties and I had completely missed, that I had missed in preparing this bench memorandum. But it was a good lesson for me in, the importance of the constraints on the judiciary. By design, by constitutional design, our judiciary is not just a free, a roving court of justice that can decide any issue that it feels like deciding. We have really important structural safeguards that are in place to make sure that the court is only deciding issues when there's an actual case or controversy. So that was, I think that was just a really good lesson, kind of right out of the gate in that, and it demonstrated to me, how principled he was as a judge, and that's something I continue to see as I clerked for him throughout the year. Just in addition to that, he was one of the hardest working, still is one of the hardest working individuals that I've seen, and strives every day to do his very best job as a public servant. And that's a lesson that I hope to take from him in this new role.
Well, Ms. Campbell, thank you very much for appearing today. I look forward to supporting you throughout your nomination process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good. Next on my list, I have Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here today and enduring this process. So it was referenced that you spent time in private practice, and I think it was, I'm not sure, is it Williamson Connolly? Is that the firm for which you worked? What type of clients did you represent, and what types of cases did you work on during your time in private practice?
I worked on a pretty wide variety of cases and for a wide variety of clients. Some of my work was corporate defense, defending pharmaceutical companies, other corporations in civil lawsuits. And even then, it was a pretty wide range of civil lawsuits. So some of it tort liability. I defended in a case involving a civil RICO claim. Some intellectual property cases, breach of contract, so a pretty wide variety on the civil side. And then I also worked on some cases where I was representing criminal defendants. Some of those were pro bono cases, and others were not pro bono cases. Some of them were white-collar criminal defense cases. So I also had experience representing individuals.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Members, anyone else have any questions? Representative Stewart, you recognize, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was glad to hear your comments about maintaining the rule of law, and I wondered if you could just expand on those and talk about how you view the court's role in our system of government in ensuring that, as you said, the rule of law is maintained without favor to any particular litigant or party, and particularly how you consider the Supreme Court's role in enforcing that and maintaining that in our state.
Sure. If I'm confirmed to this position, it will be my ethical obligation to decide cases fairly and impartially. And I will do that, according to the law and not with any predisposition toward a party or toward, an outcome, a substantive outcome in a particular case. So I do think that is incredibly important. And I think that's how, when judges do that and carry out that role effectively, that increases public confidence and public trust in the judiciary, and that is of the utmost importance.
Representative Stewart, any follow-up?
Yes, thank you very much for your answer. I have to say, listening to your answers with respect, for example, to legislative history, my feeling is that you gave very forthright and clearly carefully thought out answers. And frankly, I thought you could have kind of dodged that question, but you didn't. You took it on straightforwardly, and I very much appreciate that because, I think, as you're saying, I'm very pleased to hear you directly talk about the rule of law and your commitment to it and your kind of commitment to the tradition of the judiciary as the least dangerous branch and the branch that really regulates the rest of us. So thank you very much for coming before our committee.
Thank you.
Good question. Members, anyone else? I believe I have Representative Ogles. You recognize?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for being here today. And this may be one of those questions you choose not to answer, but the General Assembly, a combination of the General Assembly and the Governor's Office, fund the judiciary branch. In many communities, we're hearing about workloads where DAs who years ago had 50 cases, now they've got several hundred on dockets. Can you speak briefly of the funding mechanism and how resources affect the judiciary, and if in fact you think that your experience is that the General Assembly is adequately funding going forward? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think I have enough experience, frankly, to answer that question yet. If I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed to this position, I look forward to learning more about that and to listening to my colleagues and to trial court judges and others who are involved in the process in the state and really hearing them out. But that's not something that at this juncture, before I've served in the judiciary, that I have a well-formed opinion on.
Right, and I think that's more along the lines of maybe our entry-level courts, our county courts, and our state trial courts. I know that we've got dockets just that are so far behind there, Representative Ogles. So I would agree with our nominee on that. Representative Russell, or excuse me, Chairman Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make the motion to recommend Ms. Campbell to the full House.
Members, that's proper motion, prop and second. Seeing no objection, all those in favor of a positive recommendation for Sarah K. Campbell to be recommended to the full House for confirmation, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you all.
And members, I believe that that brings us to the end of today's. Excuse me. Let me get us back into session without objection. We'll go back into session. And members, I believe that brings us to the end of the day's calendar. I didn't give anyone any time this morning for any personal recognitions or anything. So if anybody has anything has anything they'd like to say, I'll give the opportunity for that now. If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn. And Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just want to recognize, last year was a tough year, and you fortunately recognized Representative Carter in his passing. And when last year, when he wasn't really around a lot, Representative Jernigan stepped up, our chairman, Chairman Jernigan stepped up last year and ran a great committee, and I thought a very fair committee. And so I want to commend Representative Jernigan for his work last year in leading this committee. Thank you.
And he certainly did a fine job, and thank you for what you did last year and stepping up. I should have mentioned that and apologize. All right, members, are we ready? Are we ready to adjourn? All right, I'll take a motion. All right, very good. And we'll meet back here next week at 12:30, same time, same place.